When the Americans invaded Afghanistan in 2001, the brave Afghan people fearlessly defended their country. Because of the technological superiority of the American and NATO armies, the Afghans resorted to guerrilla tactics. They utilized the majestic mountains and valleys of Afghanistan and used the same guerrilla tactics which they had used in order to defeat the Soviets. After the American invasion, many Afghans who previously did not support the Taliban were now supporting them in order to expel the foreign invaders. Mullah Muhammad Umar, who was the leader of the previous Taliban government of Afghanistan, called on all Afghans to unite and resist the American occupation. In many cases, Afghan soldiers in the American-backed army defected to the Taliban and joined them in their fight against the American invaders. The Afghans killed thousands of American soldiers in fierce battles and conducted many successful attacks against the invaders. For example, on the 4th of March 2002, 2 American helicopters were shot down and 7 American soldiers were killed by Afghan rebels in the Shahi Kot Valley. On June 27, 2005, an Afghan with a rocket launcher managed to shoot down an American helicopter in the Korangal Valley, killing all 19 American soldiers on board. In September 2006, 2,000 foreign soldiers attempted to capture the Panjwai district, which was controlled by the Taliban. The local villagers of Panjwai were fully supportive of the Taliban, who had brought peace and stability to the region. When the NATO invaders entered the area, they were defeated and forced to leave the district after 28 American, British, Dutch and Canadian soldiers were killed in ambushes and surprise attacks. On 13th July 2008, 48 American soldiers under the command of General Jeffrey Schlesser were forced to abandon their military base after the base was surrounded by Afghans who assaulted the base, killing 9 American soldiers. On 18th August 2008, the Taliban collaborated with another resistance group known as Hizb-e-Islami and ambushed a convoy of 100 foreign soldiers from both sides of the Uzbin Valley, killing 10 French soldiers, as well as encouraging other Afghan resistance groups to conduct joint operations with the Taliban. Mullah Omar also sent messages to the American people. He stated that he was not at war with the American people and was only fighting the US Army who had invaded his country. Mullah Umar called on American citizens to stop supporting the war in Afghanistan. On the 30th of June 2009, the American soldier known as Sergeant Robert Bergdahl defected from the US Army after witnessing American atrocities against Afghan civilians. Sergeant Robert Bergdahl abandoned his military base and took refuge in the territory of the Taliban. He stayed with the Taliban for many years and he appeared in many Taliban videos. Robert Bergdahl was eventually released by Mullah Umar in 2014 in exchange for the release of 5 Afghan prisoners. In September 2010, 35 American soldiers were killed while trying to invade a Taliban stronghold in Kandahar. In December 2010, the Taliban forced a joint army of 5,000 foreign soldiers to retreat from the town of Marja, after 45 American soldiers and 13 British soldiers were killed while trying to capture the town. In the year 2011, the Americans left the nation of Iraq, where they had committed crimes against the people for almost a decade. After American troops were withdrawn from Iraq, they were now focused on their bloodthirsty war in Afghanistan, where they were losing huge amounts of territory to the Taliban. Therefore, shortly after the end of the Iraq War, President Obama promised to send thousands of additional soldiers to Afghanistan. In the year 2011, there were over 150,000 foreign soldiers stationed in Afghanistan. However, this increase in American soldiers only increased the fierce resistance of the Afghan people. On 6th August 2011, a large American Boeing helicopter was shot down in the Wardak Valley when Afghans hiding in the mountains simultaneously fired at the helicopter with their RPGs. The helicopter was shot down, killing all 30 American soldiers on board. On January 6, 2012, 6 US soldiers were killed when their helicopter was destroyed by an Afghan rocket launcher. On 14 September 2012, the Taliban launched an attack on the American airbase known as Camp Bastion. This attack led to the killing of 2 US generals and the destruction of 8 American aircraft. The attack caused $200 million in damages and was the worst loss of US air power in a single incident since the Vietnam War. Throughout the year 2013, 91 American soldiers were killed in Afghanistan. Devastating attacks and ambushes like these continued throughout the American occupation. Mullah Omar was never captured by the Americans, and he died in the year 2015 in a simple house that was only a few kilometers away from an American base. When the Americans invaded Afghanistan in 2001, they promised a reward of $10 million to anyone who could find the location of Mullah Umar. Despite this, Mullah Umar was never found by the Americans. Although the Americans eventually assumed that Mullah Umar had fled to the tribal areas in Pakistan, he remained in his country throughout the occupation. Mullah Omar was constantly moving across the country undetected by the US Army, and he coordinated many successful attacks against the Americans. After his death, resistance against the occupation continued. When Donald Trump became the American president in 2017, he vowed to end the war in Afghanistan by using even more force against the Afghan people. During his presidency, Donald Trump used the GBU-34, also known as the mother of all bombs, which was the most powerful non-nuclear bomb in American history. Despite dropping this massive bomb on Afghanistan and killing thousands of civilians in drone strikes, Trump was not able to subdue the Afghan resistance, and he became another name on the long list of American presidents that tried to impose their will on the Afghan people. The Afghan people continued to resist the occupation, and they inflicted huge losses on the Americans, who were eventually forced to leave Afghanistan in August 2021. The Americans were shocked by the relentless resistance of the Afghan people, who refused to surrender and continued to defend their country. The Americans could not afford to lose any more men. Therefore, they fled Afghanistan and were defeated and humiliated by the brave Afghan people.
گلونا غواړو درته پلار